Welcome to Indiana Football Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I am your co-host for Indiana Football Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in our resident Hoosier expert and Hoosier beat reporter, Cole Hanna. How you doing, Cole?
Doing pretty good, Mike. Nice, beautiful day here in Bloomington today. Can't complain. So, yeah, I'm doing pretty well right now.
Oh, is it 90 degrees and sunny?
No, thank God it's not 90 degrees anymore. It's finally starting to cool down here to about a nice chill 70. A little bit of wind.
Ago,
it's perfect.
Though. It was like 95 last week.
And I was sweating walking to class. It was absolutely awful.
Well, I'm sure
I'm ready to
wants
move on from that.
Talk about the weather, so we'll move on from
that.
That's
fair point.
Indiana, almost about a week and a half ago, they fell to Michigan State 40-31. Kind of what we thought if they started the correct quarterback. If he was healthy, Michael Penix, they would be in the game. They were. Penix was impressive. 33 for 42, 286 yards, 3 touchdowns, and the thing here is they almost won this game, and Michael Penix really didn't do much with his legs. I mean, actually negative 4 yards. This was an impressive performance throwing the ball by Penix.
Yeah, no, and he even ended up probably losing 25 yards from his passing stats in that last play where they were trying to do the, pass it around and hoping they could get a long touchdown run at the end of the game, and ended up losing about 25 yards in that play. Michigan State scored a touchdown to extend the lead and make it look, not as close as it actually was. But, yeah, it was an absolutely fantastic game by Penix. And, let's be honest, this is nothing new for Indiana. I mean, we've seen them play top 25 teams tough year after year, and unfortunately they just keep finding ways to lose football games. So it's nothing new from that standpoint. Indiana fans are used to this outcome, but it almost feels new because I can't remember a guy at quarterback that Indiana's had in recent years that just has that it factor that Penix has. I mean, maybe Nate Sudfeld is the last guy you can kind of go back to with even close to the talent Penix has. I mean, this is a Michigan State defense that was giving Ohio State some serious issues when they played them last week. And they're a legitimate front seven. I mean, they've got a talented defensive roster. And Ohio State was really struggling to move the ball at times on them. So I think it's a legitimate defense. And Penix made them look silly. I mean, they did not know to defend Penix, that he was doing a lot of short stuff. Michigan State would kind of start to cheat up on that, and then he would start to take those deep shots down the field. Walt Phillier had a great game offensively for Indiana as well. It was about as impressive a quarterback performance, I think, as Indiana could have asked for from Penix. And offensively, Michigan State was not doing a great job of stopping IU all game long. And if not for some defensive issues, I think if you would have told me IU scores 31 points in this game, I would have felt pretty good about the outcome. But there's just one too many defensive breakdowns and giving up big plays to Michigan State all throughout the game. But definitely offensively and from Penix, it was an outstanding performance.
Well, the other thing that stands out to me, you scored 31 points. You gave up 40. You got to be able to run the ball. And Stevie Scott is better than 18 carries, 66 yards. So I've got to think this is an offensive line issue.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is just the front seven for Michigan State, I think, is very good. I think the offensive line for Indiana is not so good. So, it's one of those issues where, Penix has only sacked one time in the game. So from a pass protection standpoint, they did a pretty solid job. And now, granted, a lot of that was IU doing a lot of quick throws, trying to get the ball out of Penix's hands, in a timely fashion. So that factored into the low sack total. But yeah, the run blocking has not been there all season long. And, Stevie Scott's had a really down year, unfortunately. Now, I do think one of the benefits of Stevie Scott here is if you look at this game, look at the stats, no one's going to be blown away. He didn't have a great game. But, he had a good enough game to keep Michigan State honest throughout the game that they couldn't just completely game plan around Penix. Scott was still able to rip a couple nice runs. He had a 20-yard run in that game and a handful of other carries that really got Indiana into good, from a down and yardage standpoint, kept them ahead of the sticks sometimes. So, definitely you want him to be better. And Michigan State's certainly one of the better defensive teams Indiana's going to face the rest of the year. Maybe Michigan and Penn State are, I think, the only two that can really compare to Michigan State from talent defensively. But definitely you would like to get Stevie Scott going. You saw what he did last year, how dynamic he was for them last year. But, they lost a couple guys from the NFL, and obviously with the injury to Corey Cronk, that's going to continue to hurt things. But I thought Matthew Bedford for Indiana at left tackle, true freshman, played a pretty good game to, be thrown into the fire against Michigan State in your first career game. and first career start. That's obviously a tall task, and I thought he handled it pretty well. Hopefully the offensive line can get going, because if they can get Stevie Scott going offensively running the football, with what Penix has given you from a passing standpoint, that's going to be a tough offense to stop. But I don't know if they have the horses up front, Mike. I think the offensive line issues are, unfortunately, something that's going to plague them all year long.
All right, so that moves us on to Rutgers. And I think it was only a matter of when, or a matter of if, not when Rutgers head coach Chris Ash would be fired. 52-0 loss to Michigan seems to be the right time to do that. So I think a lot of this game is going to be how Rutgers responds following these program uncertainties. And to make matters worse, the Scarlet Knights starting quarterback, sophomore Artur Sitkowski, and starting running back junior Raheem Blackshear, both followed up Ash's firing by requesting to sit out the remainder of the season in order to use their red shirts. So now they've got an interim coach who I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name. It's Nunzio Campanile is at the helm in Piscataway. And this seems to bode well for Indiana right now, because Rutgers loses their starting running back, their starting quarterback, their head coach. They have to be in disarray here. Both teams are coming off bye weeks. I think Rutgers had a bye last week. So what's your take on this game?
Yeah, so Rutgers is just not a very good football team, even with Chris Ash. That team, that program was going nowhere. They've pretty much been the bottom of the Big Ten for multiple years in a row now, and also fired their offensive coordinator, John McNulty, as well. So there's going to be a lot of changes, with this new coaching staff, and they took on Maryland, as their first game with this new coaching staff, and the results were not promising. Maryland beat them at home 48-7. It was a big beatdown on Rutgers. So, and that was a Maryland team that has really been struggling coming into that game. They had lost to Temple and then just been obliterated by Penn State the week before. So the results, early results at least, from this new look Rutgers team, are not promising. So it's definitely a game that, you would like to see Indiana come out and dominate in all three phases. There's no excuse for Indiana to not dominate this football team. It's just one of those games where, it's nice to get a homecoming game. I think it's setting up a pretty important stretch for Indiana here when you look at who they play, who they have coming up. They play Rutgers, and then it's away games with Maryland, Nebraska, and then a home game with Northwestern. You never want to count the wins too early as IU, because that typically gets you in a tough position. But those are 4 winnable games with 4 teams that I'm not sure any of those 4 teams are individually better than IU. And they're sitting at 3 wins. You're trying to get to that 6-win mark, hopefully even 7 or 8 wins potentially when you look at who they have left on their schedule. But they've got to take care of business against Rutgers. I think it's very clearly the worst team in the Big Ten. I don't think it's even close. And with all these changes, they're going to be probably not as sharp as they could be. So Indiana should be better in all 3 phases. You'd like we mentioned earlier, get Stevie Scott in the run game going. There's no excuse to not dominate Rutgers up front. And if they can do that, they should be fine. I mean, Rutgers is just, unfortunately, not a very good team, and, easily the worst team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I would think Kane Womack's defense, they haven't been able to find any consistency yet. Of course, against Eastern Illinois they did. This, to me, while it's not Eastern Illinois, it's still a Big Ten opponent. It's a conference opponent. This is a game they got to come out and kind of hit the reset button on this defense and get something going. And I would think the big guy here to watch out for is Rutgers sophomore running back Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, and Pacheco had a solid game against Maryland. Ended up, rushing for over 4 yards a carry in that game, almost 80 yards total. So, Indiana did actually, one of the big things that I thought they did well against Michigan State is they did a good job of stopping the Michigan State running attack outside of Brian Lewerke. He hurt them on some quarterback keepers. But when it came to Elijah Collins and that traditional running game for Michigan State, the Indiana defense did a good job of stopping them. They just gave up way too many big plays in the passing game. So you'd like to see them continue to play, that solid rushing defense that they've played against Michigan State, continue to bring that and try to force teams to be a little bit one-dimensional. Like we said, Rutgers is going to have a new quarterback in there. You don't want to have him get a lot of help from the run game. Make the new guy beat you. I think that's going to be one of the keys to success defensively. Indiana's played a couple bad teams this year, like you said, Eastern Illinois, also Connecticut. The defense really shined in those games. unfortunately, I'm really not sure how much better a team like Rutgers is than a team like Connecticut. I'm not sure there's a huge, step up from Connecticut to Rutgers, maybe just a slight step up, but you'd like to see the defense play well. And another guy I'm looking at defensively for Indiana is true freshman corner Keon Mullen. We mentioned how much the Indiana's defense struggled against Michigan State. Keon Mullen was like the lone exception to that defensively. He was kind of thrown into a tough situation where he was pretty much guarding Michigan State's top receiver, one of the top receivers in the Big Ten, and he did a fantastic job guarding him, gave up no catches, targeted 5 or 6 times in that game, and that's pretty much been the theme for him all year long. He's given up 1 catch on 14 targets as a true freshman. That's absolutely outstanding. I think he earned a starting job against Michigan State, so I'm very interested to see how he plays. If, as I expect, he's given a starting position because he more than earned it.
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple other guys that have impressed me. Logan Justice, who's the IU redshirt senior kicker. I don't think he's missed anything this year. I think he's like 18 for 18 on extra points, 7 for 7 on field goals. So
yep.
he has been a breath of fresh air at IU. And the other guy is linebacker Micah McFadden. And he has a knack, I think, for finding the football. He gets involved on nearly every play, plays sideline to sideline. And I think that he is a player that is going to be huge for IU over the next couple of years, and especially the next few games, as you talked about. You got winnable games. You need a defense that steps up, and Micah McFadden, I think, is a guy that can help drive this defense.
Yeah, no, McFadden made a couple of really nice plays in the Michigan State game, ended up with a couple tackles for loss in that game. That was probably his best game I think he's had at IU. When you look at what he did against Michigan State, was really a force in the run game and made a lot of big-time plays in the run game. And I think there's a couple of linebackers I think Indiana has who are pretty solid players. Cam Jones as well is another pretty athletic guy at linebacker, former safety, kind of played the Husky position at Indiana defense. And I think that's another guy that you look at from a talent standpoint. And you obviously saw him get the pick 6, a couple of weeks ago against Connecticut. But I see the talent on this team defensively. I think they have talent. Just the big question to me is can this team get a pass rush? You've had some issues at corner all year long. Guys like Raheem Lane at corner have been getting picked on all season long for them. Can they generate a pass rush? Can they get guys that can beat their man one-on-one and get after the quarterback? We haven't seen it, and I think that's a big reason why you're kind of seeing these pass coverage struggles for Indiana. It's because there's no pressure on the quarterback, and you couple that with the fact that you've had some corner issues. It's just not a recipe for success. And I would like to see the safeties get a little bit more involved too. Guys like Devon Matthews, Bryant Fitzgerald. There are very few plays, unfortunately, over the top where you saw those guys kind of make a difference and try to come over and bat down a pass or make it a tough catch. Those guys are getting burned down the field routinely. And Brian Lewerke really made them look silly at times. So the secondary just needs to be better. And you're playing a Rutgers team with a new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. There's going to be some issues there. They need to take advantage and really start to get some confidence going and start playing better in the secondary. If they can do that, coupled with the improved run defense we've seen, I think the defense should be fine. They have the talent. They have the talent to be a respectable defense. We just haven't seen the consistency from them all year long.
Yeah, and Rutgers has a horrible offensive line, which will make it much easier also. So when we look at this game, who do you like here?
Well, if it's not Indiana, we're going to have some serious issues to talk about.
There'll be no bowl game or contract extension for Tom Allen.
No, that would be, unfortunately, an unforgivable loss, and that would probably be the end of Indiana's season right there, dropping to 0-3 in the conference against Rutgers. I think Indiana's approaching a nearly 30-point favorite in this game, according to Vegas. So all the money is going to be in Indiana. I think Indiana takes care of business here. I think it's a similar score to what we see Maryland put on them last week. I guess I would predict Indiana 51, Rutgers 6 would be my prediction.
All right, I'm going to say Indiana 44, Rutgers nothing. So not big. We're not holding out much hope for Rutgers. Cole, any final words before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I want to say, moving forward, I do think, like we mentioned with the schedule, this team has some winnable games coming up. And when you look at where they're sitting, they have 3 wins on the season. They have games against obviously Rutgers, Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern, like I said, and then games with Purdue, who's obviously struggling, home game against Michigan. There's potential for this to be a special season for Indiana, where they can, instead of just aiming for 6 wins, you can see the potential for, 7 to 8 wins if they can take care of business and maybe win a couple of those toss-up games. And a guy like Michael Penix, who I think is a special player at quarterback for Indiana, he definitely has that it factor. There's potential for this to be a special season. We'll see if Indiana can take advantage of that. Unfortunately, Indiana kind of finds ways to lose games historically. So we'll see what they can do. But I see some potential for a special season here. But, we'll see what happens.
I think the key game to the special season is actually Maryland. Because if you get the Maryland win, you're sitting at 5-2. You go to Nebraska. I think Nebraska, they're not there yet. They're similar to Indiana, where I think they're trending in the right direction. Then you got Northwestern at home. You go to Penn State, they're going to beat the hell out of us. But then you get Michigan at home. And the thing about Michigan is offensively, they're not very good. And that is also the game that's kind of the sandwich game where, I think, don't they have Michigan State the week before and Ohio State the week after?
Yep, you're right in between the two rivalry games for Michigan.
Yeah, and then you've got Purdue. So if you get to Maryland and to Michigan and you take care of Northwestern and Purdue, all of a sudden we're looking at 8 wins if they win this week. So that's getting way ahead of ourselves. I do that every year when IU starts out 3-0 against crappy teams, and it never works out.
Yep.
But one of these days, it will. So
you would
all
think
right.
so, right?
Yeah. So remember, you can check me and Cole out next Wednesday night as we'll review the game that Indiana just played against Rutgers and then preview the upcoming battle against who is that, Maryland the next week?
At Maryland.
All right. So make sure you follow us at Grilling Truth on Twitter. Make sure you listen to all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find podcasts. You'll find The Grilling Truth. So for Cole Hanna, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grilling Truth, where the legends speak.